Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tony T's Toon Talk, available on the Port Washington Public Library's YouTube channel. My name is Tony Traguardo, and I'm ready to talk tunes. Over the years, many popular musicians and performers have faced the wrath of churches, special interest groups, and overprotective broadcasters, and they have had one or more of their songs banned. Work that they had produced and released and spent years on was somehow prohibited from being played on the radio or performed on television. And yes, even though some or many of you watching this may have grown up in an era where songs on your iTunes playlist have the word explicit next to it, you really need to believe me. And if you're having trouble, let me give you some examples of what happened to some banned songs. I'll begin by relaying the story of The Twist. Yes, right, The Twist. Come on, baby. That one. And I'm going to use segments from an article that appeared on a website called groovyhistory.com. The article was called Buffalo Twist Ban of 1962. Not in my town, says Bishop Buzzkill. It goes like this. Was there any stopping the kids from doing the twist in 1962? A Catholic bishop in Buffalo, New York, felt obliged to try. When kids started doing the twist in the early 60s, it was a thing of national concern. Coming out of the Peppermint Lounge, the dance had made its way through suburbia thanks to Chubby Checker, Dick Clark, and American Bandstand. Teens saw the kids on the show doing the dance, and from there it was an overnight sensation. Parents, doctors, and religious figures would come up with every reason that they could to keep kids from doing the twist. It was bad for your hips. It was bad for your knees. It would drive teens to mad fits of sexual intercourse. Well, in 1962, Bishop Joseph A. Burke of Buffalo, New York, set his pen to paper and tried to stop this salacious dance once and for all. Hipsters and beatniks alike had actually been twisting since the late 1950s, when the song was recorded by Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. But it was Chubby Checker's recording of the twist from 1960 that turned the rest of the country on to the dance where you'd shake your hips and slide your feet across the ground like you were putting out a cigarette butt. The dance came to prominence after kids started doing it on American Bandstand. After a few episodes featuring Checker's song, the dance was everywhere. This wasn't just some silly dance taking over the world. It was an injection of black culture into mainstream America, when that was a dangerous thing. It was so polarizing to see white kids doing this dance that Black Panther leader Eldridge Cleaver wrote, "The twist was a guided missile launched from the ghetto into the heart of suburbia." Conservative community members wanted to wipe out the dance, but it was impossible to put that genie back into the bottle. On January 26, 1962, though, the hammer came down on the twist, and by hammer, we mean the pen. Bishop Joseph A. Burke released an edict to the people of Buffalo, specifically the parochial schools. The letter read in part, "His Excellency, the Most Reverend Joseph A. Burke, Bishop of Buffalo, has directed the Department of Education of the Diocese of Buffalo to communicate with all schools, elementary and secondary, the following regulation. For a number of reasons, not the least of which is the development of pupils in a proper sense of decorum and good taste, the current popular dance, commonly referred to as the twist, is not to be permitted at any school or parish dance." If you were living in Buffalo, New York in 1962 and you were attending dances, coming out parties, or just regular old functions, then there's no way that you'd be doing the twist. It's not totally clear if you were going to be arrested if you swiveled your hips and swung your arms back and forth, but you were definitely uninvited from any Catholic gatherings. Burke's edict banned Catholics young and old from twisting the night away, but it was mostly an empty gesture. Anyone with the itch to twist could just road trip somewhere else to get their groove on, but Burke managed to keep Buffalo clean from the scourge of dance. Now, aside from keeping the dancers of Buffalo from doing the twist, Burke's edict played into the conservative scaremongering of the day. Less than a month after Burke banned the dance from Buffalo, the Radio Trade Practices Committee called for the National Association of Broadcasters Code Committee to begin a screening process of every rock song presented to radio to listen for anything too saucy. They claimed that due to a proliferation of songs dealing with raw sex and violence beamed directly and similarly at children and teenagers, that a screening process had to be put in place. The Twist was just one of the songs that conservative America felt was bringing about the end of Western civilization. Even if Burke's ban on the Twist was something that could be enforced, it didn't last that long. While in Rome for the first week of Vatican II, Burke passed away in October of 1962, taking his hatred for the hip, sexy dance with him. And even if he hadn't passed away and was able to carry his torch for banning any and all sexy dances, the Twist was over as soon as it became a widespread sensation. When parents started doing the Twist and it popped up in beach movies, kids stopped wanting to do it. They moved on to the next thing, which is great for Burke's followers because it essentially ended the dance craze, and then it was on to the start of something new, and maybe something else to protest. The story of the Twist. I move on to a song that has become so beloved, it's hard to believe that at one point it was banned. In 1963, Peter Yarrow of the folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary wrote a folk song called Puff the Magic Dragon. After the song was released, rumors persisted that the song was about drugs, particularly marijuana. And this rumor was actually fueled by a 1964 Newsweek magazine article about the hidden drug messages in pop music. And they came up with the following interpretations, and this is right from the magazine. Puff's friend, Jackie Paper, equaled rolling papers. Puff, to take a puff, particularly from a marijuana joint. Dragon, a variation of drag, in, as in taking a drag from the joint to inhale the smoke. Puff the magic drag in. Oh my. The folk trio claim that the song is really about losing the innocence of childhood and has nothing to do with drugs. At the end of the song, Puff goes back into his cave, which symbolizes the loss of childhood innocence. Co-author Peter Yarrow insists that not only does the song have nothing to do with drugs, but that he didn't even know about pot in 1958, which kills any theory that he put drug references in, even subconsciously. Puff was banned in Singapore and Hong Kong because authorities believed it contained drug references, and in April of 1971, this was one of many songs that the Illinois Crime Commission published in a list of popular rock songs that contain drug references. Peter Yarrow wrote the song actually before he even joined Peter, Paul, and Mary. It started with a poem that his roommate, Lenny Lipton, had left in his typewriter. In a Songfacts interview, Peter Yarrow told the story. Lenny Lipton and I were at Cornell, and it was exam time. He came to my place in College Town, sat down at the typewriter, and wrote some poetic words. He had been thinking about Ogden Nash for a while, and the title of the poem that actually had grabbed Lenny Lipton was one called The Tale of Custard the Dragon, which is about a really-o, truly-o dragon. Anyway, continuing with Peter Yarrow. He wrote part of what became the lyric. He actually left the piece of paper in his typewriter when he left because he was absorbed in getting to his exams. It was not intended to be a lyric or a song or anything. It was just something that he typed on paper, and I looked at it and I loved it. I wrote the rest of the words to give it a song form and a dramatic arc and the music to it. Later, on the second album, Moving, when we were looking for children's songs, see, we did some children's songs on the first album, including Autumn to May and It's Raining, I suggested Puff the Magic Dragon, and we put it on the album, without any thought that it might become popular in any way. Yet, it happened spontaneously at some point because a DJ somewhere in the Northwest started to play the song on the radio, and it just took off. And it's the song that it now is. A few years after Puff the Magic Dragon became a hit, Peter Yarrow found Lenny Lipton and gave him half the songwriting credit. Lipton, who was a camp counselor when Yarrow found him, now gets extensive royalties from the song. Interestingly, he used his Puff the Magic Dragon money to finance his company, and that company developed the main system used for projecting films in 3D. Thank you, Puff. And if you know anyone who, and then goes, oh, never mind. Anyway, moving on from Puff the Magic Dragon, we go to a song that has one of the most profound lyrics of the mid-1960s. Barry McGuire never utters an obscenity in the protest song Eve of Destruction. He doesn't mention sex or drugs either. Yet, this 1965 single on Dunhill Records was banned by a number of U.S. radio stations, many of them in the South, because programmers disagreed with its, quote, ugly view of humanity. Some station directors felt that the single, especially with lines like, you're old enough to kill, but not for votin', was, quote, an aid to the enemy in Vietnam. Many listeners all across the country, however, agreed with the sentiments of Eve of Destruction, and they sent it all the way to #1. Eve of Destruction was written by 19-year-old P.F. Sloan, who was a staff songwriter at McGuire's label ABC Dunhill Records, that went on to also form the Grassroots and to write a lot of other great pop songs. Sloan wrote a few years back on his website, "The song Eve of Destruction was written in the early morning hours between midnight and dawn in mid-1964. The most outstanding experience I had in writing this song was hearing an inner voice inside myself for only the second time. It seemed to have information no one else could have had. For example, I was writing down this line in pencil, 'Think of all the hate there is in Red Russia.' My inner voice said, 'No, it's Red China.' I began to argue and wrestle with that till near exhaustion. I thought Red Russia was the most outstanding enemy to freedom in the world. But my inner voice said the Soviet Union will fall before the end of the century, but Red China will engage in crimes against humanity well into the next century.' This inner voice that is inside each and every one of us, but is drowned out by the roar of our minds." The song also contained a number of issues that were unbearable for me at the time. I wrote it as a prayer to God for an answer. I have felt it was a love song and written as a prayer because to cure an ill, you need to know what is sick. In my youthful zeal, I hadn't realized that this would be taken as an attack on the system. Examples: the media headline the song as everything that's wrong with the youth culture. First, show the song as just a hack song to make money, and therefore no reason to deal with its questions. Prove that the 19-year-old writer is a communist dupe. Attack the singer as a parrot for the writer's words. The media claimed that the song would frighten little children. I had hoped through the song to open a dialogue with Congress and the people, but the media banned me from all national television shows. Oddly enough, they didn't ban Barry. The United States felt under threat. So any positive press on me or Barry was considered unpatriotic. A great deal of madness, as I remember it. I told the press it was a love song to and for humanity, that's all. But it ruined Barry's career as an artist, and in a year, I would be driven out of the music business too. The song was actually originally recorded by the Turtles, who released it on their first album earlier in 1965, but the Turtles didn't release it as a single, and so McGuire's version is the one that became a hit. The Turtles did finally decide to release their version as a single in 1970, shortly before they broke up, and it was their last song to chart, reaching #100. It's a sad song, but it's also an important song. And I would encourage all of you who've never heard Eve of Destruction, especially now in the troubled times that we're in, to go and give this song a listen. Another song with relevance today that was banned at the time was the song Society's Child. The lyrics to the song Society's Child, also called Baby I've Been Thinking, by Janice Ian, center on the feelings of a young girl who witnesses the humiliation that her African-American boyfriend receives from her own mother, and the taunts that she herself endures from her classmates and teachers. It closes with her decision to end the relationship because of her inability to deal with social pressures. In 1964, Janice Ian lived in East Orange, New Jersey. Her neighborhood was predominantly populated by African Americans, and she was one of the very few white students in her school. She said in 1997, "I saw it from both ends. I was seeing it from the end of all the civil rights stuff on the television and radio, of white parents being incensed when their daughters would date black men, and I saw it around me when black parents were worried about their sons or daughters dating white girls or boys. I don't think I knew where it was going when I started writing it, but when I hit the second line, faces clean and shining black as night, it was obvious where the song was going. I don't think I made a conscious decision to have the girl cop out in the end. It just seemed like that would be the logical thing at my age, because how can you buck school and society and your parents and make yourself an outcast forever?" Shadow Morton, the same songwriter and producer who had produced Leader of the Pack, another controversial song, signed Janice Ian to a record contract and made the decision to release Society's Child as her first single. Her original title of the song was Baby I've Been Thinking, but Morton changed it to Society's Child. Leonard Bernstein's producer saw Janice perform Society's Child at the Gaslight Cafe in Greenwich Village, and he scheduled her to perform the song on Inside Pop, The Rock Revolution, a late April 1967 television special about new pop music. Largely due to Leonard Bernstein's seal of approval, Verve Records started to promote Society's Child in trade magazines, and as a result, many radio stations picked it up. But some major stations, such as Chicago's WLS, refused to play the song. Interestingly, because several radio stations were slow to add the song to their playlists, this behavior actually extended the record's airplay life. Figure, it was recorded in 1965, released in 1966, but Society's Child didn't enter the Billboard Top 40 until June 17, 1967. The single reached number 1 or the top 10 in many key cities in America. But in July, it stalled at number 14 on Billboard's Hot 100, owing to resistance in certain markets, a common problem with controversial songs of the era. Yet, with the skin colors reversed for each gender, it's interesting that the Stories recorded their version of this saga, a song called Brother Louie, and they had no trouble topping the Hot 100 more than 6 years later. Times change quickly. Closing out with Janis Ian's own words. People got crazy. A radio station in Atlanta dared to put Society's Child in rotation, and somebody burned the station down. Strangers walked up to me in restaurants and spit in my food. Sometimes when I tried to walk on stage from the audience, a person would deliberately put their foot out to trip me. The mail that I got spanned the gap between heaven and hell. One letter would thank me for bravely speaking out. The next would have razor blades taped to the envelope, so I would shred my fingers opening it. The irony of it all, she said, I wasn't especially brave. At least I didn't think so. The song was just in keeping with the times, and the times were volatile indeed. Yes, they were, and in some ways they continue to be. These days, artists have fewer issues with getting their songs heard, their music heard. The explicit tag can appear in both iTunes or in streaming services, and in some ways, artists are encouraged by the labels to say what they want to say. Back then, times were different. And that's what we talk about on this show. Interesting points about music. It's Tony T's Tune Talk. It can be found every week on the Port Washington Public Library's YouTube channel. The songs I've talked about today can be found on many online streaming services, including Hoopla, available through the Port Washington Library. My name is Tony Traguardo. See you next week. Thanks for watching. Happy listening.